Hello, my name is Kristen Bolden, and welcome to The Other Side of History. Now, this talk is titled Kingly Power. And people throughout history, they have been always fascinated with wealth and power, those that are wealthy and powerful in our world. There's thousands that have watched the royal weddings, and they've been fascinated with their every move. Now, money and power is good when it's used rightly, but it is a curse when it's misused. Duke Charles Seymour of Somerset, England, he lived from 1662 to 1748, and is said to have once made his two daughters stand guard over him while he took an afternoon nap. When he awoke, he found one of them sitting down and promptly reduced her inheritance by £20,000. So there is a tendency for the rich to be self-centered and exacting. They think of themselves as kings, and they misuse their kingly power. Cardinal Wolsey, who was a persecuting force during the 16th century, their Reformation. He was Archbishop of York for 15 years, and yet he never once visited the city of York. Cardinal Wolsey, he was very wealthy and powerful. And with this wealth and power, there's often become an attitude of entitlement and indifference to others. The kingly power that was given to Cardinal Wolsey, it resulted in the deaths of many Protestants during the 16th century. Of course, the rich, they relate to money differently than to the average folk. The Empress Anna of Russia had a palace built entirely of ice. You can actually Google and see pictures of it. The palace, which was built during the winter of 1739, it was 80 feet high, and it was adorned with pillars and galleries and sculptures of ice, and it cost over 30,000 rubles. Queen Victoria, she ate her boiled eggs from a solid golden spoon and from a solid gold egg cup. Now, unfortunately, many monarchs, they have abused their use of money and power. The Empress, Dowager Cixi of China, she was called the Dragon Lady because she was cunning, manipulative, spiteful, and she definitely misused her kingly power. She lived in luxury in her summer palace, with hundreds of dishes daily being served to her, and most of them were left untouched, while the peasants outside, they were dying of starvation. She had a servant killed for plucking 2 of her hairs while her hair was being done. Most Americans, they do not understand how international money lending works. The accounts of the Federal Reserve System have never been audited, and it operates outside of the control of Congress, and it manipulates the credit of the United States. The Federal Reserve is private, and it has one purpose, which is to gain as many profits as possible from the use of other people's money. The Federal Reserve is a good example of kingly power. James Madison said, "History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance." The Roman Emperor Caligula, he housed his favorite horse in a marble stall, and he had it fed from a manger that was also made entirely of gold. Now, Caligula, he was known for being a cruel and a tyrannical emperor. He used his kingly power that he had to rampage through Rome, committing murder, adultery, and acts of debauchery. But apparently he was good to his horse. The poor, they have not always appreciated the vast difference in wealth that is found between the rich and the poor classes. They have not always appreciated their king's kingly power. Once, when King George I of England was traveling by coach on the continent, he stopped at a country inn where he was charged a preposterous price for a meal that consisted only of 3 eggs. "Are eggs so scarce in this part of the country?" he demanded. "No, your Majesty," replied the innkeeper, "but kings are." The fanfare for the rich has at times become ridiculous. At the very beginning of television, there was a film star named Mary Pickford. She was sightseeing in a Paris market, and she was so mobbed by fans that 2 butchers, they had to actually lock her in a meat cage until the police arrived to rescue her. On one occasion, her car was nearly wrecked in Alexandria, Egypt, by fans who wanted her to autograph their ears so that they could have their autograph permanently tattooed. Now, you would think that God's people would not fall for this kind of hype, but ancient Israel was not immune to wanting someone powerful, rich, and famous whom they could call their king. The government of Israel, it was a theocracy. The work of Moses, the 70 elders, the rulers, and judges was simply to enforce the laws that God had given. They had no authority to legislate for the nation. Down through history, God sent men whom he inspired to instruct the people and to direct in the enforcement of his laws. Our all-knowing God, however, he foresaw that Israel would desire to have a king. However, although God finally did allow a king, he did not consent to a change in the principles upon which the state was to be founded. Under a theocracy, the king was to be the vice-regent of the Most High. That is, the king was only to delegate power and exercise it on behalf of the true ruler, which was God. God was to be recognized as the head of the nation, and his law was to be enforced as the supreme law of the land. When the Israelites first settled there in Canaan, they acknowledged this principle of a theocracy, and the nation, it prospered under the rule of Joshua. However, as Israel began to mingle with the heathen neighbors that were around them there, and adopted many of their customs, their own peculiar holy character, it was sacrificed. So just as today, where people they're attracted to pomp and the display of monarchs, Israel began to grow tired of their own simplicity. They had also begun to depart from obedience to God's law, which was also what made them this simple people. They reasoned that in order to maintain their standing among the nations, the tribes must be united under a strong central government with a king that was at the top. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 6 and 7 says, "But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, 'Give us a king to judge us.' And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, 'Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them.'" Israel was caught up with the hype of a rich, powerful king who would rule over them. They had mingled with the heathen nations around them, and they had learnt their works and their customs. These things that they had learned it appealed to their carnal natures. Samuel's life of purity and unselfish devotion was a perpetual rebuke both to the self-serving priests and elders and to the proud and the sensual congregation of Israel. Now the people had become weary of Samuel's piety and his devotion, and they actually despised his humble authority and rejected him for a man that should rule them as king. Is this not the same treatment that our Savior got when he came to this world? He was the light of the world, and that light revealed the hidden depravity of the hearts of men. It was the holiness of Christ that stirred up against him the fiercest passions of the false-hearted professors of godliness. The carnal-minded, they were not excited about Christ. Christ came with no wealth and no worldly honors. Yet, the works that he did, it showed that he possessed power greater than any human prince. The Jews said that they wanted a Messiah that would break the Roman yoke. Yet they cherished the sins that had bound that yoke upon their necks. The Jews, they wanted a rich, powerful king that would cloak their sins and applaud their piety. Instead, Christ, he fearlessly rebuked their vices. He entertained no hatred except that of sin. It was for these things that he was despised and rejected. The people of Israel, they chose Saul as their first king. And God allowed this, but Saul did not end up in being a good king. When a king does not follow God's principles for rulership, he becomes oppressive. In the 1930s, Stalin, he rose to the highest position there in the Soviet Communist Party. Stalin's policy was strangle whatever you can, and what you cannot, falsify. Under Stalin's kingly power, individual freedom was excessively restricted. Stalin formed a cult of personality, where Soviet citizens were forced to give lavish and outrageous praise upon him. One poem by a Ukrainian poet reads like this: "Today and forever, O Stalin, be praised for the light that the plants and the fields do emit. Thou art the heart of the people, the truth and the faith. We give thee our thanks for the sun thou hast lit." Now, in a speech made in 1936, Khrushchev, he spoke of Stalin as one whose name millions of toilers pronounce every hour with pride and boundless love, our dear friend, our wise leader, everything that is best in the possessions of humanity, the greatest of all men. Stalin is hope. He is expectation. Stalin is our banner. Stalin is our will. Stalin is our victory, our friend and father, the greatest man of our epoch, the greatest genius of humanity. Well, then, in 1956, when Stalin was removed from power, Khrushchev, he denounced Stalin as a tyrant. If the kingly power that is found in government, medicine, science, religion, education, etc., and you can add to that list, if this kingly power in these institutions were removed, like Stalin's power was removed in 1956, I wonder what kind of statements of truth would be revealed. Some believe that a government cannot be so corrupt that it becomes rotten to the core. Some believe that medicine cannot become so corrupted that it becomes rotten to the core. Some think that what is considered as science cannot become so corrupted that it's rotten to the core. Some think that what is religion cannot be so corrupted that it's rottenness to the core. Some think that education cannot be so corrupted that it is rotten to the core. Let's look at what happened with the corruption of all of these institutions that happened all at the same time. Now, this corruption was played out in Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler. Hitler said, "I am now, as before, a Catholic, and will always remain so." He said, "Hence today I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the work of the Lord." Hitler's government, it was corrupt to the core, and it had a mass re-educating program that was also corrupt to the core. The anti-Semitism of this new Christian social movement of Hitler's, it was based on religious ideas instead of racial knowledge. The religion, it was corrupt to the core. Medicine and science became corrupt to the core, and mass medical experiments and murder happened on thousands of Jews and also others. Those who desire kingly power in a destructive way, they are aggressors, and yet they are also parties of peace. They want nothing more than to march upon their neighbor unresisted. There is a power which one human mind is capable of exerting upon another human mind. This influence, it is often so seductive that the person who is being molded by it is often unconscious of its power. And minds today, they are being hypnotized. The whole goal of hypnosis is to lead people into an altered state without jarring them. There are small changes that are introduced that shift people into a different way of thinking and acting. There are thinking men and women in our world that have seen the stealthy hands of these aggressors slipping the bolts to many of our institutions. Institutions such as government, medicine, science, religion, and education. Yet these thinking men and women, they have held their peace with apparent indifference to the results. Hitler used hypnotism from his pulpit, but also through a network of agents who created an infrastructure of members that were friendly or neutral to the new social order of the Nazis. In every age, there have been mischievous tongues and acute minds, sharpened by long practice in evading the truth, who have been continually at work to bring in confusion. Hypnosis is the most awful science that has ever been advocated. Every wicked being can use it in carrying out his own evil designs. We should have nothing to do with it, nothing to do with hypnosis, and we should be afraid of it. One does not have to speak in a monotone way to be hypnotized. Two instructors in hypnosis named John Grinder and Richard Bandler, they said, "It is actually much more effective to sound thrilled if you are taking someone back into a thrilling experience. Being in a trance doesn't mean that you have to be dead. In hypnosis, what you hear and see and feel is actually amplified for the most part." Now, this evil science of hypnosis, that's being promoted by these two men, John Grinder and Richard Bandler. It's being studied by politicians, lawyers, pastors, educators, and many other people in our world today. It is true that Satan can take the mind captive without any training in hypnosis. However, when the study of hypnosis has become a required course in some fields, and it's widely used in both the secular and the religious world, we are living in troublous times. Neuro-Linguistic programming. It was developed from the hypnosis of Milton H. Erickson. Now, in Ericksonian hypnosis, the skill of the hypnotist is developed so well that they can put someone into a trance in a conversation in which the word hypnosis is never even mentioned. A man by the name of Sid Jacobson said, "In 1984, I took an introductory workshop and discovered, much to my surprise, that it worked well. After messing someone up to the point where he almost needed hospitalization, I decided to be trained in it fully so as to not repeat the mistake. I find that it works scarily well. So well that even someone with poor training in it can do a lot of damage. There was no quality control in the field, and a lot of people go around teaching NLP who know very little about it." End of quote. There are those in our world today who desire power, and they want a kingly power where they can rule over others. Some of these power-hungry individuals, they even are self-deceived that they think that they are using this misuse of power for good. Yet no one is to control another's mind, or to judge for another, or to prescribe his or her duty. God gives to everyone freedom to think and to follow his or her own convictions. Every one of us will have to give an account for himself or herself to God. We must search the scriptures for ourselves and judge for ourselves as to what is truth. We should not be yielding up our judgment and committing our souls to some leader or to any human being. No one has a right to merge his own individuality into that of another. In all matters where principle is involved, everyone must be fully persuaded in their own mind. In Christ's kingdom, there is no lordly oppression, no compulsion of manner. The angels of heaven do not come to earth to rule and to exact homage, but as messengers of mercy and to cooperate with men in uplifting humanity. Christ is shining down upon the stream of society, and he is able to break up the snow and the ice of man's repression and to carry it downstream, opening up clear flowing water. Now, in the scriptures, Christ is said to be the living water, and he calls for us to come to him and to drink freely. This is the only kingly power that we should strive for. We should strive for the mind and the character of the King of the universe. As Thomas Jefferson said, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." My appeal to you is to make this statement your own. I hope you've enjoyed this little talk, and if you have, I would just like to encourage you to click on that like and that subscribe button. And I want to thank each one of you for listening and the comments that you leave, and I just really appreciate each one of you, and I am wishing God's blessings also on each one of you.